Hi, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Ominous Hour. Let me crank down the music a little bit. I hope you aren't getting tired of that particular background. I kind of like it for certain topics. So today, as usual, we're going to be talking about a topic that's been sort of forced into my mind by what I've seen online, the interactions I've had with friends, and new content and so forth, and that's kind of where it's coming from, and we'll see where it goes. I wonder if that's still a little bit loud. We'll let it go. Okay, the topic today, I'm going to title this one Eyes Wide Shut. Spiritual Marxism in Action. So let's talk about that title first, like we often do, to give you a background of where I was at, what I was thinking, what I mean by those terms. Those of you who are not familiar with that term, Eyes Wide Shut, maybe aren't aware of the movie of that name, a Nicole Kidman, Tom Cruise movie, directed or produced at least by, what's his name? Clockwork Orange. Stanley Kubrick. One of Stanley Kubrick's body of work. Interesting movie. Hollywood-ized look at the elite world of high-rolling Satanists, pedophiles. Some people point to it as, oh, gee, that's just a really interesting movie that's all fiction. And other people have stated that, you know what, that should have been a documentary. Somewhere between those poles lies truth. And where the reason I chose that name is that it really matches a theme that I've been poking on quite a bit lately, that truth is a very hard thing to nail down. Okay, so what is spiritual Marxism? I could have called it spiritual communism. I could have called it spiritual Unitarianism. So let's define what Marxism is, and then turn that into a broader sense so we can understand its spiritual implications. So as most of you know, Marxism is an economic ideology that was devised by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, and codified in a work they called the Communist Manifesto, which posited that all of the world's problems, all of humanity's problems, revolved around the unfairness of the prevailing system of government, economic organization, the system of capitalism. And it posited that the solution to capitalism was communism. What was communism? Well, you have to understand that the background. So the premise was that, well, humanity is made up of two classes of people, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. The basic difference between those people are the proletariat are the ones that don't benefit from capitalism, and the bourgeoisie are the ones that do. And if we destroyed capitalism, then everybody could benefit through instituting communism. Are you with me so far? Okay, this is the idea behind Marxism. You can go read the Communist Manifesto and prove that to yourself. Now, this was a very attractive idea to people working in factories, slave labor type factories that existed in the age of Well, if you want to see what life was like during that time, Dickens is a great place to go. Going to prison for debt, work, prisons, indentured servitudes, all those things were still happening in that time. And slavery was still quite rampant. Other forms of slavery. So there was quite a few people that felt that the system wasn't working for them. And this is a very appealing ideology for anybody who doesn't feel like they're getting their fair share, which is most people, right? I don't know of anybody that doesn't want more than they have. Very few, very, very few souls have I encountered who aren't tempted by the desire to have more than they have. Economically, politically, and spiritually. And as you may know, if you've listened to many of my talks, everything about human culture, our relations, our economics, our politics, etc., are all essentially spiritual, because spirituality is the manifestation of thoughts. We are each a soul, independent consciousness that has its own thoughts. Sometimes, or has thoughts programmed into it, unbeknownst to it, which is the difference between a low-level soul and a high-level soul. The lowest level soul, the level 0 soul, completely works off programming, doesn't even realize they're programmed, just acts out the program that they were given. And that's where we all start out. So don't say it's not me or that doesn't happen. Anybody who has the experience of growing up in a human incarnation vehicle knows that's where you start. Some people think that's where you're only place you'll ever be, and everything is completely deterministic and our thoughts are never our own. This is the fallacy of materialist science, which I talk about too sometimes. Okay, so that was the essence of the original Marxism. What it has turned out is that this is not really a new idea. It's just a restating of a very old idea without religion, without a spiritual basis for it. And if you know anything about communism, Marxism, you would know that if you're a real true believer of Karl Marx, you're an atheist. You don't believe in a God. You don't believe in anything but physical reality. This was a very popular thought in the time when it was thought that science could explain everything and could give a rationalization, basically, for social Darwinism, which was a very popular thought then, that most people don't deserve to have any independence because they're too stupid. And this is the essence of social Darwinism. We've got to create a system that's so perfect that imperfect people can thrive in it, can be harmonious in it. This is the essence of communism. This is the essence of Marxism. Now, anyone who knows anything about how the Russian Revolution played out, how the USSR played out, how communist China played out, how every attempt at communism has ever played out, knows that it does not work. All you do by destroying all other political parties and making the Communist Party the center of government is create an even worse mess than you had before. You create an oligarchy that has no particular justification for their power except their belief in communism. You create dictators, supreme rulers, who don't believe in communism, but use that ideology like you would use a religion to gain a religious following. And if you know anything about the cult of Stalin, the cult of Lenin, the cult of Mao, the cult of Xi, etc., the cult of Fidel Castro, you understand where communism goes wrong. It is a cult. It is a religion masquerading as an anti-religion. Now, those failures were pretty obvious early on. And so the true faithful said, you know, what Marx and Engels missed was in just only identifying this as an economic disparity, the haves and the have-nots, because that doesn't seem to be working in countries where people are relatively happy with what they got, which was true of most of Europe and the United States and the former countries of the British Empire at the time. And so they decided, you know what, we need to change this game a little bit and make it a cultural battle. And basically use this same tactics that they used to take the Soviet Union, to create the Soviet Union, and to create communist China, and turn them into a cultural battle. And this is how, in fact, the Cultural Revolution maintained the power of the CCP when it was severely threatened in the 80s. They turned it into it was earlier than that. This was in the 60s. That democracy first raised its ugly head in China, and it was swatted down through cultural Marxism, making it into a cultural battle. This culture's good, this culture's bad. And if you're bad culture, then you need to be attacked and shut down, silenced, marginalized, sent to a gulag, your job taken away from you, your kids taken away from you, etc., for re-education so they can learn the right things. This sounding familiar? So cultural Marxism is essentially the same as spiritual Marxism, because culture is how humans manifest spirit. That spirit can be manifested in truth, in spiritual truth, or in spiritual lies. And if you don't have any deeper knowledge of spiritual truth, the lies can be pretty convincing. Okay, so spiritual communism has been around for a long time. Spiritual communism is essentially using spirituality, using one of these lollipop ideas of spirituality, easy spirituality, to control the masses. Catholic Christianity is spiritual Marxism, spiritual communism. One God. If you just do everything that we tell you based on our better understanding of the one God, you'll go to heaven. Otherwise, you go to hell. And what did that do? That created, and this is the nasty thing about spiritual communism, because basically it creates an artificial good and evil. And in order to maintain that artificial definition of good and evil, good has to be hidden if it becomes too good and starts exposing evil. And evil has to be hidden if you want to maintain the system. This is why, if the truth were ever known about what was really going on in the Vatican all these thousands of years, it would shock every single Catholic on the earth. Now, that's not to say the religion doesn't have some very, very dedicated and true believers. It doesn't mean that it's not founded upon some very solid spiritual principles. It does mean that its organization, its physical manifestation, its leadership has to a large extent been disconnected with any spiritual truth, disconnected from God. the real God. And pretty much anyone that says, my God is the only God and I know what's right and wrong, is a spiritual communist. So, okay, what's the alternative, Rob? We can't all be right, can we? This is true. There is evil. We've all seen it. We have all seen people who have gone so far down the dark side that they would push nuclear buttons. They would destroy their entire country to maintain power. The Hitlers, the Stalins, the Xi Jinpings, the Mao Zedongs. There are people like that. And there are people like that in almost every position of power in every country that ever existed and every religion that ever existed. Because most of the people in power are there because they like power. They want power. That is their religion. If you worship power, you know what? You're not worshiping God, because that's not the real God. The real first creator was the one who created free will, that gave all souls the ability to change their surroundings, to create a local reality to some extent. Now, that doesn't mean we can create anything we want, right? That's the law of attraction nonsense that says, oh, I'm an infinite spiritual being. I'm a manifestation of God in this little body, and if I just suck on my source essence, I can make this whatever I want it to be. This is just another version of spiritual communism, isn't it? You're making yourself God. Now, that's one of the worst ones. Actually, it's the most delusional version of spirituality I can possibly imagine, and it's very popular. What are some of the other examples of spiritual communism you see? One that I'm seeing a lot lately is East good, West bad. How much content do you run into online that says, well, if only we could just embrace Eastern ideas and kill Western ideas, everything would be perfect, because Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism and Hinduism and blah, 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 blah is the best, right? Am I right? Have you seen that? Now, there are probably just as vocal things saying West is good, East is bad. And that's another version of the same thing. It's not a geographical thing. My country, right or wrong, is spiritual communism. My country, wrong or right, against my country, wrong or right, is also spiritual communism. And there are people on both ends of the spectrum in most countries. Ones who think that their leader is God Almighty, and ones who think they're Satan incarnate. Those are both dangerous, dangerous positions, and they are spiritual positions. Love and hate are the essential spiritual emotions. And to the extent we lie to ourselves to create love, to create hate, that's the delusion of a narcissist. And this is essentially how spiritual Marxism works. It is essentially saying, I don't believe in anything spiritual. I don't believe in good or evil. I don't believe in reincarnation or karma or anything, except that I want to control people and get them to behave the way I want them to. And because nobody's as smart as me, I will use their spirituality against them. Now, what are some of the ways? What's the best way to use people's spirituality against them? To try to destroy it, right? Destroy their faith or make their faith so exclusive that everybody's got their own religion, me. And that's essentially what you've been seeing happen in the media for at least the last 100 years, if not longer. Creating a cult of me, a cult of individual rightness, which is essentially the same as this law of attraction. I can make the world be whatever I want it to be. And when you can't do that, you find groups that say, oh, well, we just have to band together and combine our spiritual energy, and then we can force the world to be whatever we want it to be. And you get into these cults of oneness. And that essentially the cosmic oneness cult is a dumbed down version of spirituality that's trying to create this big tent. If we could just force everybody into this big tent, Christians and Muslims and everything else, and make them believe in this oneness thing, then we win. This is communism. This is Marxism. These people are spiritual Marxists. They're delusional. They want you to lose your individuality in a oneness of their definition, thinking that you're gaining your freedom, which is the sickest thing about spiritual Marxism I can think about. And this is true of the Catholic Church. They convince people that by following all the rules, donating to the church and obeying the noble, as long as they were in good standing with the church, they could earn salvation, right? That was the whole message of Christianity. At least institutionalized Christianity. Now, the true message of Christianity, which was wiped out by the Orthodox and Catholic churches, was the true message of Messiah that has been peeking out all the time. What is that message? It's a message based on reincarnation and karma and the free will of each individual soul to do with what they have, what they are able to, and what they want to in many lives, in many incarnations. You can become a god. What is a god? It's just one manifestation of a soul. There are 3 levels of manifestation as a soul: physical, spiritual, and God level. Some souls find that physical manifestation suits them just fine, and they keep reincarnating, trying new scenarios, trying out new places to be born, new families to have, new countries to be part of, etc., ad infinitum. And there's tons of choices you can make there because, in fact, time is a continuum. If you want to come back in the Roman Empire, you'll get that chance. Eventually, when folks feel like you're worthy of it. Are you going to be able to change the future? Not necessarily, because there are parallel universes, parallel timelines. Most of the people living now in ancient Rome are living in a virtual reality, working on their own personal futures, not the grand future of the prime universe, which is a term that I talk about quite a bit. And I'm not going to get into here. I'm just going to mention some of these things, so maybe you'll start looking at some of my other content. I really want to stay focused here on this idea of spiritual Marxism, because it's very, very key to what's going on right now. Right now, we are in the middle of a transition between days of creation. We are about to end the 7th day of creation, which was not a day of rest for God. Not when everything was perfect and we screwed it all up because we didn't listen to God. That's bullshit. What is going on right now is the culmination of a great experiment. Call it the Gaia experiment, call it the Sol experiment, Call it the Milky Way experiment. Call it the universe anti-universe experiment, because this experiment goes all the way back to the beginning of physical creation. The physical universe is what we see and observe is a manifestation of thought. A virtual reality, if you will, but a very real virtual reality that we play in, and our choices in these realities have consequences, which is, something that a lot of video game designers have realized is an important feature to design into your virtual realities, that your decisions have consequences. If there's no consequences to doing something stupid, then smart players won't want to play the game anymore, because the stupid ones can do just as well as the smart ones, maybe even better, because they're more willing to take risks. Okay? So, there are many poles of spiritual Marxism going on right now. There are people who are close to the truth in many ways, but missing some key points. You probably encountered the Matrix crowd, who think, oh, the movie The Matrix was virtual reality, and it's really true, and we're being used and we're being milked for our spiritual energy by some evil power that designed this simulation we're in. Well, that's a partial truth. But it's a really bad truth, because the designers of this simulation were gods. And the simulation you're in is not to punish you. It's not to milk your spiritual energy, although there are some spiritual entities that do that. And if you give your allegiance to them, that's what they will do. Those are the entities that choose the path of Borg, the assimilator, the anti-god. I want to control everything. I want all the power. I want to be the almighty micromanager of the universe or multiverse or whatever. That's Borg. That's the definition of the ultimate evil spiritual entity that thinks they know better than anyone else and is willing to tyrannize any soul to get to what they want. And if that's what you want to pursue, that serves a purpose too, because that identifies you as a soul that doesn't deserve to have independence. And you'll be assigned to a God role that doesn't give you much God power. You might be the god of reptilian toe cheese in the galaxy Gumlangadon, in the universe Black. And that will be your role for as long as you're stuck playing that position as a failed god. Not an evil god, just a god that really doesn't matter. That's not worthy of giving a very important position in the multiverse. We all have to hold up part of this big tent called the multiverse. We can hold it up in any of three ways. We can hold it up through physical incarnation, through taking a physical body, a physical form, like a human, and living out a lifetime. We can hold it up by taking a spiritual incarnation and becoming maybe one of the spiritual advisors of one of the Christian heavens, or one of the Muslim heavens, or one of the atheist heavens. And yes, there are all of those. And yes, some of those heavens are more like hells, because their whole reason for existence is training, helping souls find themselves, find their right place in the multiverse. And if they discover they're very dark souls, they don't do much good, they cause problems, they're going to be given a role that is not going to cause too much harm. They'll be perfectly happy doing it because they'll be isolated, and the ultimate isolation for dark souls is to get to be a god of your own universe, where nobody wants to play your game with you except for zero-level souls who are just basically androids. Programmable robots, you can make them do whatever you want, but they're never going to give you any real love. Can you imagine how lonely that would be? This is where Borg will end up when this game is all finished. The thing is that you can't just set up the whole thing that way from the beginning. If God did that, God would be what? Borg. God would be an autocrat, would force exactly, oh, this is what I know is going to be right, so I'm just going to make everything like that because I'm good. That's not the way it works. God had the idea. He inspired others with that idea and allowed them to have their own ideas too, and set ideas in motion. The whole of physical creation is the implementation of God's big idea. And the implementation of the people who hate God, their idea, the Borg. The ones who think that, oh, we can't let souls have any free will. They're a bunch of idiots. All these young ones, oh, they're doing so many stupid things. We got to control them. We got to give them laws. We got to do them. Okay. Creation is about a balance between those two forces. Since the beginning, since the first universe pair was created by the Big Bang, the first Big Bang, I don't know if we're in the first Big Bang or the 18th Big Bang or whatever. Not my specialty. But I know that it all started with a spiritual experiment. A universe, anti-universe. The universe basically being the test tube of the God team of free creation. You can do whatever you want. Versus the Borg team of, no, we got to tell you exactly how to do things. And those two exchanged ideas over time and created laws together. This is why you have the laws of physics and chemistry. Planets just don't go, whoop, oh, I'm going to go over here now. Well, they can, I suppose, if enough spiritual energy is exerted, but they generally don't. They follow very, very set patterns. Patterns which gave us a lot of the inspiration for our mythology, for our gods. Now, those patterns are really quite interesting. They have a lot of numbers encoded in them that seem very magical and special, and have led us to further discoveries that are making new laws. When you are creating a bigger atom smasher, a bigger CERN, a bigger Fermi lab, whatever, you are attempting, in your own feeble way, to discover new laws, right? Discover new particles, discover new facets of what would hopefully be a grand unified theory of everything. This is what drives particle physics. This is what drives astrophysics. Believe me, I know, because I was a physicist. I got my degree in physics. I went to Princeton for grad school. I dropped out. So I know these things, okay? It's not only wanting to know, it's wanting to be part of defining it. That's why when we discover a new planet, we like to name it after ourselves or after our dog. Because, in essence, there is a creative element to that. And the discoverer is, in some sense, a creator. The observer, in quantum mechanics, is the creator of this new phenomenon. And if you know anything about how quantum mechanics works, you know it's a very statistical thing. Laws get established by observing something enough times from enough different perspectives to codify it. And the problem that we've got in quantum mechanics is they haven't figured out a way to bridge the laws of particles when we observe something in a particle-oriented experiment and the laws of waves, which we know that matter can behave as either a wave or a particle, and this is like dual nature, weird stuff, and causes a lot of people to be very uncomfortable with quantum mechanics. But it's fundamental to the nature of truth, the nature of that thought creates reality in the multiverse. It doesn't create absolute reality. You can have a thought, a fantasy thought, and it does create a reality. You can write it down on paper, and that makes it even more real. If you can sell a lot of copies, wow, that creates a lot of energy around that idea. And this is why I give an example. There is a Tolkien universe. Tolkien has become a god through his writing, through his imagination. And to the extent that there are still many souls who look to his work for inspiration, for meaning, his universe will thrive and grow maybe. Maybe Middle-earth timeline will come to overshadow the timeline of the Prime Universe. I sort of doubt it because there are a lot of elements of his fantasy that just don't stick together for very long. A lot of ideas in his ethos of what's good, what's evil, how evil thrives and how good overcomes it, that don't really play together that well. And this is why Tolkien himself worked most of his later life was trying to figure out a way to make this idea that worked so well for the trilogy of Middle-earth and maybe The Hobbit work in a larger context, and never was really successful doing that, and didn't publish anything else within his lifetime. His children tried to finish it so they could profiteer from his unfinished work, basically. This is the truth of the matter. And not many people read the Silmarillion or others of his works because they have these glaring holes that he was trying to fill and couldn't fill in his vision of this perfect fantasy. Okay, so getting back to spiritual Marxism. Okay, the poles of spiritual Marxism go from all the way from I create my own personal fantasy and try to force it on the world to we create a one fantasy for everybody and try to force it on the world. Those are all spiritual Marxism. What isn't spiritual Marxism, you ask me? That's a good question. What isn't spiritual Marxism is spirituality that is backed up by fact, by science, by observation, by the experience of many, many souls. Sorting out that experience, finding out the commonalities and the differences, and saying, okay, this is the core truth that would explain all these things. And this is what I have tried to do in my spirituality. I've had my own spiritual experiences. They were very individual, very unique. And if you want to hear about those, you know, I've done 3 whole sessions on the life of Rob, so you can get every play-by-play detail, I think, or ask for more if you want. But what I did in processing that, in integrating that, is maybe something that most people don't do with their spiritual experience. Because I had a background in science, because I'd had a very strange background that included science, performing arts, experiences living in other countries whose cultures were radically different from my own, somehow I was driven to find a different answer than most people do when they have their own personal spiritual experiences. And I became an integrator. I looked at other people's experiences and evaluated them, graded them, decided what was true, what was maybe fantasy, what was maybe misinterpretation, cultural misinterpretation. Okay, if you see a creature come to you in a bright light, and that's your first experience of spirituality, that creature might seem to be God. And you could be forgiven for assuming that that thing is God, right? And that's the way many people's first spiritual experience is. Or if it's in a negative context, you think, oh, this must be a demon, this must be a ghost, this must be something bad. There are a wide range of spiritual encounters you can have. The most basic of which is the dream. And the easiest way to deal with a dream is what? You just say, oh, it's just imagination. It's just like, it's meaningless. It's got nothing there. And to a large extent, that may be true, because if you don't give a dream meaning, all you're really doing is seeing a window on a different universe at a different time, a different place, that may or may not have any connection with your own path, your own choices, your own direction in this life or any other life. And that's possible that it does have no meaning. It's also possible that dreams have incredible meaning. And that's why all throughout history, you hear cases of people having dreams and it being something very, very, very important and causing them to make radical changes in their lives and go on missions to do this or do that or whatever. One of my favorite stories, because it's one of the easiest to verify, and it's documented from many points of view, is the story of Joan of Arc. I would highly encourage you to study this, because this is a person who had revelation through dreams that were so strong that it prompted her, a girl of 16, to go start a military campaign that finally began driving the English out of France. And this is a confirmed fact. It's well documented. She was tried essentially 3 times. First, by an ecclesiastical court that was basically French-leaning, that decided, yes, her visions were inspired by God, and she should be listened to. Second, when she got captured by the British, actually by the Burgundians who handed her over to the British, she was tried by an ecclesiastical court that was England-leaning and was condemned as a witch and a sorceress and burned to death. And then later on, much later on, she had a 3rd trial before the court of the Vatican, whoever there is responsible for saying who's a saint, and she was canonized. This only happened, I think, about 100 years ago, using the well-documented records of the 2 previous trials. And those were very well-documented trials conducted according to procedures that were basically identical, even though the judges and the juries were quite biased. Makes a very interesting study in spiritual Marxism, because it shows multiple polarities of viewing the same spiritual experience that all pretty much acknowledge that this was a valid spiritual experience, either a manifestation of God or a manifestation of demons. There was no doubt in anybody's mind that something was going on here, because for a girl of 16 to change the world like she did, to become a legend. Let me think about it. This is the most famous woman in French history. Way more famous than Marie Antoinette. Let them eat cake. I don't know. Maybe she's more famous. Infamous, I would say. At any rate, spiritual Marxism is a common failing. It's not something to be ashamed of. Everybody falls into it. You fall into it because you want to believe something and you don't have any strong evidence not to. However, the danger of spiritual Marxism, spiritual communism, is that it is inherently geared towards believing what you want to believe, not what is true. And to the extent that your beliefs are disconnected from truth, from objective reality, which includes the laws of science, the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, and spiritual laws, because spirituality is a science too. Reincarnation, karma, free will, those were all designed. Designed and tested, and they are evolving. This is how the system was set up by the first creator, God, who was not the almighty micromanager of the universe, who was not the one consciousness that we're all part of, and we're just experiencing this strange reality of our current life, so that God can like get more experience. This is insanity. I mean, this is narcissistic insanity. These people who believe this are in one of the darkest poles of spiritual communism I can think of. And we got to get through to them. It's not healthy for them. It's not healthy to think that this life we are living is not real. It's just as real as any other incarnation you could have. That's the way the system was set up. It's just as real as being an angel, being a Clarence, and helping, George Bailey get his life back together. That's a wonderful movie, by the way. It does a better job of explaining spiritual truths than almost any other film I can think of in Hollywood history. Watch it. It's a wonderful life. The God level of incarnation is different. The spiritual level of incarnation is different. You have different rules. You have different knowledge. You don't have infinite knowledge. No soul has. God doesn't know everything or want to know everything. Who would possibly want to know everything? That's insanity. I got an older brother like that, thinks he knows everything, and he's fucking insane. Nobody in the family will even talk to him anymore because he's so sure of everything he's right about that you can't even have a 5-minute discussion with him without him insulting you. That's not spiritual enlightenment, folks. That is spiritual communism. And in its worst state, you are going to find yourself isolated into a belief bubble that is so exclusive that nobody can stand to be around you. You're going to end up like my brother in your older life, driving everyone you love, everyone who cares about you away, because they just can't have any kind of even conversation with you. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And I don't know, I probably have a few over the years because I'm not perfect. No soul is perfect. Any soul that thinks they are perfect is delusional. And delusion is the essence of spiritual communism, spiritual Marxism. It's a delusion into making one determinant of good and evil more important than any other. This is the essence of communism. It says, oh, the most important thing is equality. Equality of outcome. Everybody should have the same. This is insane. It will never happen. It's unnatural. It is nature's way for things to struggle in their life, to try to gain more. In fact, that's all low consciousness souls ever focus on. It is only when you gain the first level of spiritual awareness that you realize, oh, well, anything that I gain, if I become more successful, then it's going to hurt somebody else. So maybe I should be less selfish. Doesn't matter what your religion is or if you have no religion. This is the first level of spiritual awareness. That there is a good that doesn't involve me, and in fact I might be contributing to hurting that good, to preventing that good. This is first level spiritual awareness. It's not a high level of spiritual awareness, and this is the danger, because when you start realizing, well, there might be something bigger than me that's more good than my individual good, that you become very vulnerable then. And you become an attractive target to spiritual grifters, ideological grifters, like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who, most people don't know who those guys were. They think that they were, some popular leaders, kind of like the BLM founders. Oh, they were like defenders of the common man. These were rich people. These were rich elites, rich Jewish elites, frankly, from Europe, who saw a system developing that was going to maybe cut them out of their traditional position as the European elite intellectuals. And they didn't like that. And they thought, well, if we create this alternate reality, this pseudo-religion that's anti-religion, maybe, because people are following what we do, our kind can become the elite. And to some extent, this has actually happened, because if you look at the elite of most institutions of higher learning, they are very, very Marxist in their thinking, in their ideology. They're teaching that to your kids. And your kids are teaching it to younger kids. And this is why cultural Marxism is so dangerous. Because this version that we've created, this anti-religious version, this anti-spiritual version, is very harmful. And they've realized how to make it even more harmful by exploiting its spiritual component, by making classic Marxism into cultural Marxism. And to the extent that the people of power, the people of influence, the million subscriber golden children of the big tech monopolies are able to control and influence popular opinion, especially among the young, the vulnerable young. And frankly, I have to tell you that your daughters are more vulnerable than your sons. Sadly, this is the truth because the cultural programming and the biological reality of male and female makes them more vulnerable in many ways to this kind of programming and to these narratives. The fact that they are less strong, less bulky, less able to do hard physical tasks, sports, military service, etc., gives them an inherent weakness which these cultural Marxists can exploit. It's the most wonderful minority you can force Marxism on because they can't change it, right? Well, now they're trying to change it. They want to turn women into men and men into women. And that's got to be the sickest thing that our species is doing right now. It's really dark, and it doesn't have to be. And it all goes back to what I'm talking about today. It all goes back to understanding what spiritual Marxism, spiritual communism is, and not allowing it to enter into our soul. Not allowing it to become our prime motivator, not allowing it to become the programming that we act off of, unconsciously, subconsciously. How many people do you know? Well, my last name. This has been a fun one. My last name is Tromp. T-R-O-M-P. Now, early in my life, in the U.S., that was kind of an unusual name. So people would always want to make it something else. I would get mail addressed to Rob Truneys, Rob Trom, Rob Trump, all sorts of variants that seemed to the people to be more in line with what they heard when they heard me say my name, or whatever. When Orange Man became bad, all of a sudden my name was like, ooh, is that just like, are you related to Donald? Was a common response. I've even had people who just look at my name and assume that I am a right-wing terrorist, white supremacist, MAGA hat-wearing lunatic and will attack me on sight. It's that bad. Their programming has become that severe that they react in that way to somebody whose name just happens to be one letter away from one that they've been programmed to react to. This is dangerous. This is really, really dark stuff. And this is what happens to people if they get to their first level of spiritual awareness and let themselves be manipulated without moving further up the spiritual chain. Okay, the second level of spiritual awareness is, okay, there's bigger agendas going on than me, and there's greater goods out there than just my own good. The second level of spiritual awareness is that there are also greater evils, and those evils manifest themselves as good. They hold out lollipops to little kids and then lure them back to the gingerbread house where they get stuck in the oven, or lure them back to the pedophile's house where they get their oven stuck. This happens, and it happens more frequently with cultural and political institutions that are built upon Marxism. The biggest abusers in the world are Marxists. You have only to look at the truth behind the leaders of the USSR and Communist China and other communist countries to see just how bad it is. You have only to look at the truth behind the pedophile scandal in the Catholic Church to see how their version of spiritual Marxism has damaged the reputation, damaged the mission, the image of Christianity. This is how Marxism destroys good. It destroys the good in organizations by promoting the evil, by allowing the evil to function within those organizations, pretending to be good. And that, to a large extent, is what happens when leaders pursue power for power's sake. They start out with noble intentions. Once they got the power, then, depending on the scope of that power, they will use it and they will abuse it. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. You don't want an almighty, micromanaging creator of the universe to worship. That is an evil universe. That is a dark universe. That is a universe of slaves. Now you can go for that. That's absolutely something the multiverse needs. It needs slaves. It needs souls that are just going to go keep the engine running, keep the planet spinning around, keep the galaxy spinning around, etc., etc. Keep turning hydrogen into helium and helium into lithium, and etc., and stars forever. And that's all an important part of creation. It's an important part of the multiverse, but it's not a very fun place to be as a soul. It's no fun to be in a slave duty where you don't get many choices. The good news is that there are term limits on things like that. So you don't actually have to spend eternity in purgatory or hell, which is one of the fear factor elements of a Catholic Church, which is not true. You always get a second chance. You always have to take another chance. There is no God that doesn't have to reincarnate themselves. Oh yeah, you can sit on your laurels till nobody wants to play in your universe anymore. When you get lonely as a god, you will incarnate. You will take physical form and earn your godhood, or a different godhood if you want to do something different. If you made a mistake, maybe you were the god maybe you were Borg, the ultimate god of mind control and assimilation, domination of other souls. I would think that Borg is the most likely to want to incarnate again and do things different once their universe gets lonely enough. So it all works out for all souls in their own way. I'm not telling you you can't do this. I'm not telling you that we won't see a 1,000-year Fourth Reich of Orwellian proportions hit our civilization. Could happen. Will a lot of people suffer? Yeah. A lot of incarnations in that time will be ones of suffering. But people will choose those incarnations, either because they think that's what they want to live in, that's the environment that we were, it would be so harmonious. Everybody's told what to do, what to think, when to think it, and everybody gets an equal share of nothing, except for the ones that we don't want to see because they're our leaders. They deserve more. Okay, you want to live in something like that? You can, and you will, until you learn to appreciate something better. You learn to invent something better. I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm not preaching to you. I am teaching you. And I hope you learn to recognize the difference. Until then, I think that's been a good Omnist Hour session. Like, share, subscribe, interact any way you like, and tune in for more content on my channel, Rob Tromp's Omnist Hour. Take care.